Hello, everyone. We are live once again with Kana Monitor, sharing some of the most interesting stories from the last month. I want to make it quick before ending the week. Nice Friday. We have a very intense week ahead. At least with Kana Monitor, we're going to be Monday and Tuesday in Berlin, and then Wednesday to Saturday in Bilbao. So ICBC and Spannabis, two big events next week. We're already about one quarter of the year. Time flies, so it's the time to start scoring some wins and really making the progress that we were hoping for in 2026, which is already playing out to be a very important year for global cannabis. We come from 2024 and 2025, which were, I would say, very good years for international cannabis, thanks to German legalization. But not only, we also had very good development in markets like Australia, the UK, or Brazil. And 2026 is showing some signs of consolidation, but the story is still one of growth. We are seeing some positive signs also in mature markets like Canada, which had been suffering from price compression and oversupply for a few years. And now the companies are starting to report some positive quarters, some profits, and therefore are also looking at international opportunities. And this is what brought this wave of M&A and in the beginning of 2026, which may continue to play out during 2026. I'm sure this week in Berlin, there's going to be some deals that are going to be either discussed or finalized. So today I wanted to go very, very quickly over some of the data that we shared recently with you all, and also get an opportunity to present our most basic platform, Kana Monitor Essentials, which serves as our content hub for all the data that we publish at Kana Monitor. Here we can always develop it in more detail. And also we have access to some exclusive data, such as the news dashboard broken down by different items of the industry, like regulatory news or science papers, as well as the M&A tracker. So our platform is growing month after month. I'm very happy about it. And I really recommend all of you that are interested in our free content. I really think for 14 euros a month, it's still to get access to all the information that I'm gonna show to you today. Also, we are updating it pretty much every week. We are deploying new features and we are improving the platform. It has nothing to do with the platform we had just a few months ago or when we launched it last year. So in our last revamping of the platform, we have added some tabs to make navigation easier, pages more lightweight. So we hope that this helps you access all the information that you need in a much easier perspective. So first, you have the content hub with the webinars that we have been doing, our monthly briefs, which are the premium version, not just the summary version that we share on our socials. And then we have a variety of insights on very relevant topics of the international market that we can develop in way more detail in this platform compared to what we can share elsewhere. So this week alone, we published, or in the last couple of weeks, we published some export data from Canada that I'm going to show you in more detail, as well as the first results of the EKOCAN evaluation on German legalization, which is a government commission report, therefore high quality of data, at least let's say the politicians are going to assume it so. And now that we are having this discussion about the MedCan-G amendment that's supposed to be finalized in the next couple of months, it's very relevant to have this data. And I think it's, even though the recommendations include some tightening, I think it also paints a picture that is positive for the industry, in the sense that the illicit market is starting to recede, and this is thanks to legal access being established through the pharmacies. So one of the main features, of course, of our platform are the monthly briefs and all the content that we share, but also all our subscribers have access to a news dashboard where you can review different developments broken down in different ways. So for instance, these are the most relevant news for market regulation and science, only the start ones. But maybe you are interested in nailing down in a particular country, you can do it also through here. Or if you have something that is even more specific, we also support it. So, for instance, let's say you care about um, medical markets, and you don't want to be reading also the news about CBD or something. Here you have it broken down. Or let's say you are looking at pharmaceutical companies involved in the development of licensed pharmaceuticals. So you also have a view that is targeted to this type of companies, and this is very helpful. But moreover, we have been deploying this M&A tracker, where we have over 300 deals, financial deals that have happened in the last few years. This includes both raises of debt and equity, also APOs, also asset sales and divestitures, and so on. And this is very helpful to visualize what's happening in the industry right now. And as you see, we have 9 billion in total consideration in over the last few years, 364 deals. And you can always look at for instance, these are the latest deals. So even we have an APO in Poland, we have a few announcements of debt issues in the US. We have a merger between Canify in Germany, a distributor, and a producer in Lesotho, which is very interesting because we hadn't seen that much vertical integration internationally, and now this is a very interesting deal that might have, even though MG Health is not the main supplier to Canify, they have a diversified supplier base. This idea of integrating GMP capabilities, both one and two, with their validated supply chain, they can gain perhaps some efficiencies. And this was something that was hypothesized, and even there were some market entries a few years ago that were presented along those lines, but we hadn't seen so much of this type of thing materializing lately. So those are trends that we are following as 2026 is progressing. So first, let me show you a little bit of our March brief, which we have also revamped with country-specific pages so that you can, more easily find the information that you need. And for every country, you have a full brief that shows you the regulation, the market, and the science news that are more relevant for that country in the month. As you can see, it's fairly detailed and it's hierarchized so that you can find all the information. In this edition, we include 44 countries and something like 350 different news. It's also been improving over the last couple of years that we have been doing the brief. But as I said, what I consider most relevant for this month are the data published in Germany, the government-related evaluation, as well as some Canadian data on exports, which also paint a good picture because, after all, we are talking about the center of both demand, which is, of course, established in Germany right now, and the center of global supply. So if, let's say, our calculation is that last year there were about 400 tons of global demand worldwide, we know that Germany imported 200. Let's consider that supply and demand, they do not need to fit one-to-one because, of course, there's product in inventory, there's so not everything that gets traded gets sold to patient. After all, there's also a time. So of course you first need to import it in order to sell it later, and this is why the figures never fit exactly. So for instance, German regulators published 93 tons were imported from Canada in 2025, whereas Canada customs data published by StatCan reports only 88 tons exported to Germany. So it's never going to fit, but more or less it paints the same picture. So we are saying that Germany is at this point close to half of global demand, but Canada is even more relevant than that for global supply, at least for flower, because something that we saw is that the dominance of flower in the exportable products from Canada has been increasing over time. So in 2021, it was 25%. extracts of the value of exports of cannabis exports of Canada. 25% were extracts. Now it's even lower than 10%. So flower has been increasing its weight and has been the main product that accounts for the Canadian dominance internationally. So if you add up all the products from the different origins in international markets, the contribution of Canada is closer to 2/3 or even 3/4 of global supply, depending on how you account for it. So this dynamic, this transatlantic triangle that we mentioned last year, including Portugal, is for sure the main supply chain axis that is shaping the international medical cannabis market. So anyway, let's go into a little bit of the conclusions of this EKOCAN evaluation that they made. And yes, we published some posts, but of course, in our platform, we have the opportunity to share the data in a lot more detail. So I think the main thing that has been apparent from the data is the fact that the legal pharmacy supply, which had always been marginal in the context of broader German demand, now this is no longer the case. It already represents a sizable portion of the market. So depending on the EKOCAN, has several assumptions on the prevalence and the demand, mostly based on user prevalence. So this is what they report, what users self-report of their consumption, if they have used in the last week, in the last month, in the last year, and where they have acquired the products, etc., etc. This has some methodological problems sometimes because other types of reporting, for instance, with residual water analysis, THC metabolites in wastewater, usually point to other results. But it serves as this is the established methodology by the European Union Drugs Agency that can be used across countries because the methodologies are very well established. So it's highly relevant, I would say. And also in the case of Germany, since they revamped the reporting after legalization with this commission report to the University of Hamburg, we also get the sourcing shares of the population. And what we see is, like most in Europe, still social supply, which is on the limit between commercial and non-commercial, because we're talking people acquiring from other people they know that are maybe cultivators, or maybe they are small scale dealers and they buy and sell perhaps, is still fairly dominant. And in the case of Germany, it's 35% of the users in the second half of 2025 report acquiring from the social supply, which is interesting, but also something that was reported by companies involved in the grow shop segment and the home cultivation, particularly in 2024, I would say, was this big increase in cultivation as Germans, now that it's legal and they have the ability to grow up to 3 plants at home, they are attempting it. And let's say the home cultivation prevalence as a sourcing supply multiplied by 4 between H1 2024 and H2 2025. It's true that during 2025, operators don't report this sales increase so big that happened in 2024. It normalized a little bit, but still the data points to something similar. Then we have the associations, non-commercial associations, which, according to the regulator, those were the backbone of German access as it was intended by the CAN-G passed in April 2024. However, we have seen that these clubs are not fully materializing, in the sense that they are considered to account under 5% of the sourcing of users is through those clubs. Of course, they have several limitations, like the 400 member limit that make it a little bit more difficult. Also, the licensing in some states has been not easy. Even some clubs that started their operations have already started closing in some cases. And even though many clubs are still ramping up operations, and we can expect this segment of the industry to increase, the interim data, let's say, makes them non-significant for now in terms of the broader macroeconomics of the cannabis market in Germany. So I think this is something interesting. And then what do we have about the pharmacies? Well, oh, by the way, and this is the data on the clubs as reported by EKOCAN. So they are assuming something like 200 clubs, 230 clubs in operation out of 366 that have been approved or licensed. So in maximum, they could have 150,000 users, but of course, in Germany, there are millions and millions of users. But anyway, to what I was saying regarding the relation between the pharmacy and the broader cannabis market, even though, of course, it's medical, it follows pharmaceutical rules, it already accounts in macro terms for a sizable portion of German demand. So the prevalence method used by EKOCAN estimates between 670 and 800 tons, 830 tons of medical demand in Germany, which some people in the industry consider a little bit on the lower end. Perhaps I would agree. I consider the upper bound of this assessment more likely than the lower, so about 820 tons, and the 200 tons that were imported into Germany, and even more if we consider the, let's say, 2-3 tons that were produced domestically by licensed operators in Germany last year, makes this total medical supply into Germany north of 200 tons, and this is already, depending on the assessment we take, about 1/4 or even up to 1/3 of all the requirements in the market. EKOCAN also mentions other increased supply from illicit sources, mostly mentioning the origins of Thailand, Canada, and the US on the illicit side that have seen an increased rate of imports, non-licensed imports into Germany, and this is also feeding into this supply situation. And let's say the main driver for the medical system is not, let's say, so much sick, naive people that didn't use cannabis before that are now discovering a therapeutic alternative, which I'm sure is happening as well. But according to EKOCAN, it's mostly users that were already accessing cannabis before. Now they are accessing through the pharmacy, and there are some drivers that are driving this, and this includes, of course, at least the perception of higher quality in the pharmacy, but it's probably not a perception also. I'm sure, of course, on the underground, I'm sure there's very high quality illicit operators that can keep high prices and such. But still, for instance, if we look at the average THC concentration, another study also by the BKA, the Federal Police Agency of Germany, looks at the THC concentration on the illicit market, at the potency, and it has been increasing. So it was 2023, 14%, 2024, 14.4%, and 2025, 14.8% THC. So we're looking at 15% THC in average on what's available on the streets or on the illicit market, whereas in the pharmacy, 15% is very, very low, and the average is 25% or even more. So there's already a big difference in this sense. But also, of course, the legitimacy of just buying from a licensed source, and also the convenience that you can just order online and have the package delivered into your home. This has also been a big driver. But the other one that is mentioned by EKOCAN is, of course, the price evolution, which is way underway in the German market. And I also wanted to show you this data in more detail that we also published on LinkedIn, but here we have in way more detail for all our subscribers to analyze. And what we see, the BKA also conducts analysis of darknet listings of products with actually a big sample of thousands of both flower and hash products. So this is interesting. And they found on average price that has already been dropping 15%, and is now sitting slightly at 8.25 median price and a little bit higher for the average. This is in contrast to the street pricing that I was mentioning before in the case of the THC, which is considered to be very stable at around 10 euros. This has a little bit of a range. So I think Bavaria is closer to 12, and some states like Bremen are closer to 8 euros per gram on the illicit side. But let's say there's been a sustained price compression due to inflation as the 10 euro mark as a benchmark has become established. And this is relevant because then below we have the prices from two online pharmacies that EKOCAN has been tracking. And I would say this paints an interesting picture due to two reasons. First, we have the comparison between the 2025 average and the December of 2025. And through other sources, we know that price compression really started around Q3 2025. There was some price compression since the end of 2024, I would say, but the acceleration of price drops started in the second half of 2025. So the 2025 average might be slightly lower than the price that we had at the beginning of 2025, let's say, but not that much low. And we see that this average that we could consider perhaps the price in the middle of 2025 compared to December 2025 has seen already over 15% drops for both pharmacy A and pharmacy B. So this is very interesting and relevant, I would say. And also something else is that the difference between the two pharmacies already points that the market is not so undifferentiated and commoditized as someone could expect. There's big differences on pricing between operators, between brands, and also between pharmacies. And this is relevant because also some operators report their pricing figures online, showing massive declines and showing even average listing prices that are 3 euros or 4 euros. However, at least for market sizing purposes, or if we want to really grasp the market average, I don't think we can take any one single source at face value, because there's still, for instance, physical pharmacies that are not specialized in cannabis, that are charging the full price. They are not trying to compete with online platforms, etc. And even within the online platforms, there's different models, and within the operators, there's also different models. So while many operators are seeing, if you look at their listings from a few months ago and you look at their current listings, you have seen that there's been some price drops, but still there are some references that manage to keep their pricing power because they are highly demanded and they are still running out in the pharmacy. So it all needs to be nuanced. We know that there's price compression, but I would say also, if we look at what happened in Canada and other more mature markets, we're also looking at more stratification of the market. So it's not that all the prices are converging to this average, but in fact, it's the opposite. We are seeing some very low prices that are driving down the average and probably can move with very fast velocity and in big volumes, but we still have some premium references that are keeping the prices up. So this is highly relevant, and we are also here. We also looked at the hash prices, which are still not very relevant for the pharmacy, but I would say this is also something that EKOCAN barely touches upon, but that is, I believe, very relevant. The fact that medical demand has been focused on the flower. There's some oils and very, very few more advanced manufactured SKUs in the market, but those can be available in the illicit market, particularly for concentrates, for instance, which are, if you wish, if you want a connoisseur category, but that can still drive demand, and particularly demand of users that have that use a lot with a lot of intensity, and also that have perhaps some recognition power and that are trendsetters in the market. So it's also relevant. So anyway, well, and of course, product range expansion is also something that is covered by the EKOCAN, and we have seen that this hasn't been this hasn't changed. There's now, according to EKOCAN, 2,000, barely south of 2,000 SKU references in the market, and even in particular pharmacies. Well, first, it's apparent that of course, they are not carrying the whole range by all the brands. So there's a little bit of a distribution play as well on where you are listed. this interplay between the distributor and the retailer. But we see that even despite some pharmacies complaining about not having consistent references available for patients that need therapeutic continuity and so on, we see that the amount of variety in the market hasn't ceased to expand. And this is for flower, I remember. So something that would be very interesting and that would help continue this trend of stealing market share from the illicit side of the illicit market would be, of course, having more variety of products in the pharmacy. But anyway, guys, we have just 5 more minutes. So I wanted to also show you and comment a little bit the Canadian export data that we published, that we also have available. In this case, if you want access to this page in particularly, send me a DM and I'll give you access. But this is also available to all of our subscribers in the platform. So we have a dashboard looking at the evolution of the exports according to StatScan. We had to clean a little bit the data because there were a couple of entries with very low price and high volume that distorted the figures around here in 2022 and 2023. But I must say that this data doesn't fit, like I was saying before, with the import country, but moreover doesn't fit either with the Health Canada permit data. And this is very relevant. In recent months, let's say the difference has been converging, so it's not so big, like for 2024 data. But in previous years, it's completely different. So this is something that needs to be considered because 2023, I think the exports reported by Health Canada were quite higher. So this is data reported by Customs to Statistics Canada. So it has some methodological, inconsistencies or things that need to be considered to assess the data properly. But anyway, we see that in 2025, we are talking almost 600 million of flower exports. If we include the extracts, it's a little bit more. It's 640, I believe. And then we see how it's distributed also by countries. We see that Germany, in the flower segment in particular, we are talking 48% of the value of exports. Thanks as well because it's still the export market with the higher average price. This is, of course, due to EU GMP requirements. It's not as easy to get into Germany as it could be to get, for instance, into Australia or Israel or markets that accept other GMP processes or even GACP and so on. But then, of course, we, as we always mention, we need to consider the processing countries. In the case of Europe, particularly Portugal, because 90% plus of what Portugal exports is to Germany. So Canadian exports to Portugal are rerouted then to Germany. And the same we could say about some countries that weren't that big, but are now starting to grow, like Czechia, which is reported to import over 10 tons from Canada in the last year, whereas their domestic market is under half a ton. And their exports to Germany, according to German data, were a couple of tons. So there's some, this between the 2 tons and the 10 tons, there's potentially some processing activities going on that we expect to see perhaps in future data releases, or there might be also some inventory buildup as companies are validating their supply chains through Czechia to access Germany. This needs to happen, of course, in a fully pharmaceutical validated supply chain. This validation process and audits need to happen for every configuration. So for producers and also for distributors, their strategy in their go-to-market is highly relevant to, one, be efficient and not spend too much with too many partners and small volumes on the one hand, of course, but then two, to minimize regulatory risk, because we have already seen, for instance, now a new investigation in North Macedonia on licensed producers, but that were deviating to the illicit market. So even if you are working with a player that is fully respectable and is not doing anything that is not allowed, it can still affect processing timelines, permit processing timelines, etc., like we saw also last year in the case of Portugal. So this is data that we are continuously updating. If you subscribe to our platform, you will be able to see it um, before anyone else whenever there's an update on the multiple data sets that we cover. And this is something that we also have in our more advanced Decide platform to be released very, very soon with even more sources of information. So, for instance, we have this earnings tracker where we not only cover the, the financial releases themselves in terms of revenue or EBITDA, but also their segment of sales. So, for instance, sales outside domestic market for a variety of companies. And we also see, since German legalization, which falls around here, a big development, like it multiplied by three the amount of quarterly international revenue of different companies. We see that Curaleaf is very strong. We see other players, particularly those that have production operations overseas, like Aurora and Tilray, are also very big. And we see other operators, each with their own strategies. So, for instance, Kronos, which is very well positioned in Israel. We see Village Farm, which is a wholesale producer selling through third-party distributors, not their own. Others are verticalized. So this is the type of data that we are looking at in detail. I hope this very quick review was useful for you. Hit me up if you are going to be in Berlin, and talk to you very, very soon.